These are the last few lines of chapter 13. Why then, Denny persisted, why do you need a copy of Fortitude? Christina's eyes sparkled. Because, she said slowly, her voice barely containing her excitement, it's about to be stolen. Chapter 14. Stealing Virtue. What? Cried Denny and Carl simultaneously. Marvin poked his head farther out of the pocket, almost toppling to the floor. Christina smiled. Not the real drawing. Don't worry. James's copy of it. I don't understand, Carl said. Denny frowned, raking his hair back with one hand. Nor do I. And since the real one belongs to the Getty, I think I'd better hear the details of this. Perhaps we should sit down. Christina pulled out a chair and sank into it, placing the drawing in front of her, her hands flanking it on the table. Denny and Carl sat down on either side of her, but James remained standing. So I can see, Marvin thought gratefully. Well, Christina began, Denny's familiar with the background of all this, but I doubt you two are. She turned to Carl. Know anything about art heists? Sure, Carl said. The famous ones, the Mona Lisa, the Gardner Museum in Boston. What? Asked James. What are those? Christina took off her glasses and set them on the table, staring at the drawing. The most famous art thefts of all time. And what I'm about to read is what the author wrote, things that actually happened in history. So here we go. The Mona Lisa was taken in 1911. An Italian workman took it from the Louvre, planning to return it to Italy. It was missing for 2 years, but they got it back. She rubbed her forehead. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum wasn't so lucky. The biggest single art theft in history. In 1990, 2 men dressed as police officers arrived in the early morning, saying they were responding to a call. They handcuffed the security guards and stole 3 Rembrandts, a Vermeer, a Manet, and 5 Degas paintings, among others. The whole lot was worth almost $400 million. They've never been found. Wow, said James. Marvin thought of all those paintings. Gone. James looked at Christina. But why do people steal them? What do they do with them? Christina sighed. Usually it's for the money, she said. But of course, the paintings are often so well known they can't be sold openly at auction. Denny nodded, rubbing his forehead. The market in stolen art is a difficult one. Thieves can't sell to museums or reputable dealers. Any private collector who buys a stolen painting can't display it publicly. He or she would have to want it for its own sake, just for the art, and be willing to enjoy it in private. Christina nodded. So, it tends to be a black market business. Criminals trade the paintings for other forbidden things, like guns. Really? James's eyes were wide. Marvin had to admit it was hard to picture someone swapping one of those lovely, delicate, centuries-old artworks for a secret stash of weapons. Well, that's one kind of theft, Denny interjected. Stealing art is not like other crimes. Sometimes it's not for money at all. Sometimes it's really for love. True, Christina nodded. There can be a genuine feeling behind it. In the case of the Mona Lisa, the thief just wanted the painting returned to its homeland. But why would he care about that? James asked. Carl ruffled his hair. It's Leonardo da Vinci's most famous work. Many Italians see it as a national treasure. They aren't happy that it's in a French museum. His works are common targets for thieves, Christina said. Madonna with the yarn winder was taken from a Scottish castle several years ago, by two men posing as tourists. They overpowered a guide and took it right off the wall. Was that worth a lot of money too? James asked. Oh, yes. It's a masterpiece. 50 million? 100 million? Never recovered. James let out a long breath, and Marvin wasn't sure whether it was because of the lost money or the lost painting. Do they ever get them back? The paintings, I mean, he asked Christina. It's rare, but it happens. You can't imagine how exciting that is. She squeezed James's shoulder. When Edvard Munch's painting, The Scream, was found, the museum opened its doors for a night and served champagne. Everyone in the art world was overjoyed. And then there was that strange theft in Manchester. Right, Denny? Christina turned to Denny for confirmation. In England, a few years ago, a bunch of stolen canvases by Van Gogh, Picasso, and Gauguin were found rolled up in a cardboard tube and stuffed behind a public toilet, just down the street from the gallery where they'd been stolen 2 days earlier. Was the thief caught? Carl asked. Denny shook his head. Not that I recall. And in that case, he left a nice little note complimenting the gallery on its security. He smiled. Again, it's not your typical crime, and the people involved aren't your typical criminals. Well, Christina protested, sometimes they are. The National Museum in Stockholm? 3 men with guns broke in and stole a Rembrandt self-portrait and 2 Renoirs. Yes, that's right, Denny murmured. They escaped by speedboat. Those paintings were recovered by a Danish policeman posing undercover as an art buyer. Really? Carl said. They got all of them back? Yes, Christina answered, lost in thought. All of them. So that's where the history piece was written, and now the rest of this is fiction. The room fell silent. Marvin's head was spinning. It was hard to imagine dusty, quiet museums as the settings for such flamboyant crimes. It was also hard to believe that a drawing or painting could be worth so many millions of dollars. But what's all this got to do with the Dürer drawing? Carl asked finally. There are 4 drawings, actually, Christina said, of the 4 cardinal virtues: fortitude, justice, prudence, and temperance. Bellini drew only a picture of fortitude, but Dürer drew pictures of all 4, all miniatures, incredibly detailed. What does that mean, prudence? James asked. His father paused. Carefulness, really. Being cautious, thinking things through. That was like James, thought Marvin. James was always careful. And temperance is moderation, Christina explained. Not overdoing it. Marvin rolled his eyes, though no one could see him. Grown-ups couldn't seem to understand that it was always better to overdo it. Okay, 4 Dürer drawings, Carl prompted her. And they were stolen, or at least 3 of them were. Prudence and temperance were taken from a little museum in Baden-Baden, Germany, 2 years ago. They were so small, the thief just lifted the frames from the wall and tucked them under his jacket. It would be so easy to hide those drawings, Marvin thought. They were so little. Justice, Christina hesitated. Marvin saw that Denny was watching her, his expression a blend of sympathy and regret. When she didn't go on, he started talking himself. Justice was taken last year. The Met had just purchased it, at Christina's urging, from a London dealer. It was a major coup for the collection. Old master drawings have become a hot ticket lately, selling for hundreds of thousands. I wanted it for the Getty, of course. He smiled down at James. A companion to Fortitude. My museum in California has quite a collection of European drawings, and I have a soft spot for Dürer, for the virtue drawings in particular. Justice had minor water damage, Christina continued. It was in the conservation department last March, being repaired, when the office was broken into. That drawing was the only thing taken." She shook her head at Denny. "It was terrible," Denny said. "I was in New York for a conference, and the theft cast a pall over our entire weekend. We were all just stunned." "I remember reading about it," Carl said. "But why only that drawing? There must have been other valuable artworks in conservation." Christina and Denny exchanged a wistful smile. "Dürer," Denny said. "Yes, Dürer," Christina agreed. "If it were just an ordinary theft, you're right. There were several other valuable paintings in the office. But it wasn't about the money, in my opinion, nor were the thefts of the other two drawings, Prudence and Temperance. People have a thing for Dürer." And that's where we have to stop for Chapter 14. More to come.